Okay, we are in Senate Institutions. It is May 27th, 2025, and we have Attorney Rick Siegel with us to review the changes that the House made to Senate Bill 69, which is also known as Kids Code. So thank you for being here.
Yeah, Rick Siegel, Office of Legislative Counsel. Madam Chair, can I share the side by side?
Please.
That created much easier to view it that way. So on the side by side, which I believe I sent to Linda as well, on the left side you have the as passed by the Senate, and on the right side, as of today, earlier today, you have the as passed by the House. Green means that their language was added to the House version. Red means language was removed from the Senate version. Yellow means the language is a little bit different on each side. So the first thing the House did was add under the definition section the definition of age range. That definition comes up later, talking about, you may or may not remember the age assurance methods that businesses can use, and the AG can eventually create rules, adopt rules to help businesses determine ages. Kind of a common sense definition. When you hear the phrase age range, it's obviously from one age to another age, but it was recommended that that definition be added just to ensure that we all are talking about the same thing, which is an interval with an upper and lower age limit, or a label indicating age above or below a specific age.
Calendar? It may be. I don't think so. Okay. Okay.
Okay, consumer health data was removed. That's because sensitive data was also removed. We'll talk about that here in a little bit. So a lot of these definitions that dealt with sensitive data have been removed because the requirements of sensitive data were removed from the House version. Controller was removed because there really wasn't anything in the bill that regulated controllers, and the word is not used in the bill anymore. So controller has been removed from the House version.
Okay, that's a big deal. Okay.
Okay, going down, no changes on page, I forget what page I'm on, but these starting with covered business, no changes there. Then going down to definition 20, where you have minor on the Senate version. So removing the last part of that definition, the who is a resident of the state, it actually became, it was argued that it was harder for business to determine that a minor is also someone living in the state. So it's one less thing for the business to account for, that you have to know, right, how many users are minors. Just that, no, not also are they a resident of Vermont, just that they are under the age of 18.
Okay.
Neural data is a sensitive data definition, so that was also removed. The definition of neural data.
Because it's insensitive data.
Correct. It's considered sensitive. It was considered sensitive data in the Senate version.
Okay.
Under the definition of personal data, you can kind of see a little bit of addition on the House side. Adding, I'm just going to read the House version. Personal data means any information, including derived data, and unique identifiers that is linked or reasonably linkable, alone or in combination with other information. The Senate version that kind of doesn't have that phrase, the alone or in combination with other information. This matches the House's data privacy language. You can decide to keep it or not, but this was more to keep that definition the same across the bills.
Yeah, just quick question. I think that's the addition is definitely in harmony with the rest of the definition.
Yeah, I mean,
just because it says, you know, linked or reasonably linkable.
Sure.
Kind of shows you that there's connections.
Yeah. Okay. 24A on the Senate side was removed. Again, this is precise geolocation. This was sensitive data. So because that was removed, we also are removing precise geolocation data as a definition. Next page, well, at kind of the bottom of that page, processor. On the House side, they added 2 additional terms of what a processor could be. Processor means a person who processes personal data on behalf of a covered business, which is what the senator has said, but they added another processor or a federal, state, tribal, or local government entity. That's pretty important because this bill does regulate processors when it comes to the data privacy aspect of it. So you're saying that a processor can also be an entity that processes not just on behalf of a covered business, but on another processor. You have these kind of third-party arrangements sometimes. And I think it's intended to close the loophole where you have a processor that is kind of offshoring its processing duties to avoid liability. This would ensure that a third-party processor is also considered a processor. And it's done on behalf of the federal, state, tribal, or local government that's also considered a processor.
Okay, and did they take testimony on the impact of the state of Vermont?
Did the state of Vermont testify? It's a good question, Madam Chair. I don't recall that, but I do know based on other testimony that Vermont does have obviously third parties that process, as I think you know as well, on its behalf. Yeah, I don't recall testimony on that specifically.
Okay.
Profiling, a little bit of a change on the profiling definition. So on the Senate side, it means any form of automated processing performed on personal data to evaluate, analyze, or predict personal aspects related to an identified or identifiable individual's economic situation, health, personal preferences, interests, reliability, behavior, location, or movements. On the House side, it is more inclusive, including an individual's economic situation, health, personal preferences, interest, reliability, behavior, location, movements, or identifying characteristics. So that last phrase is new, the identifying characteristics. How important that is, I'll leave that up to you all. It's not anything too seismic of a change, but it is a change.
Okay.
Do you know why that change came about?
This goes back to the data privacy, matching the definitions. The House data privacy.
Matching the other bill.
Yes, yes. Which, you can choose not to do. Publicly available information means information that is, looking at the House version on the right side, is made available through federal, state, or local government records. And it was added or to the general public from widely distributed media. That's a fairly significant change because if information is publicly available, that really removes a lot of the data privacy protections in this bill and in your data privacy bill. So clarifying that, if information was made widely available, then it's publicly available. That's not a defined term, but it's generally known that, widely distributed media means it's accessible to most members of the public on the internet or on TV and the newspaper, those kind of things.
Okay. Are there questions on this?
Second subdivision there, subdivision II, substituting a controller for covered business. I think this was the only time that controller was used in the Senate version of the bill, and it made sense to change that to covered business because a controller can also be covered business, but you have to meet that definition. Okay, on the Senate side, you had one element of what publicly available information does not include, and that was 6 VI. Any inference made exclusively from multiple independent sources of publicly available information that reveals sensitive data with respect to consumer. So because we remove sensitive data, we remove that aspect of it. Okay, going down to reasonably likely to be accessed. It means an online service, product, or feature that is reasonably likely to be accessed by a covered minor based on any of the following indicators. C, the online service, product, or feature contains advertisements marketed to minors. This was approved in the House version, and the theory here is that really broadens the scope quite a bit, that a business may not really be targeting minors, right? But if they have one ad that targets minors, that makes them reasonably to be accessed. So this was to strengthen the bill's constitutionality and try to ensure that you're not looping in businesses that are not the bad actors that are creating apps that are addictive,
Okay,
harmful, that kind of thing. And it's more content based.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. So this takes out the content based. Gets part of that definition, but it also reduces the number of businesses that might be swept up.
It does, right? And that's I talked to House Commerce quite a bit about that. Is that if you want this bill to survive, you're going to have to find ways to not be specifically inclusive or exclusive.
Mhm.
And you'll see that coming up more. If you start, I told you this too last time I was here, is that if you start picking and choosing who is part of the law's intent, that becomes problematic. It should apply to, in general, Okay. Definition 30, sensitive data on the set aside was removed. That's a very long definition, so it takes up a large portion of this side by side.
and that's related to the other changes that you told us.
Yeah, really, it comes down, you'll see where we use sensitive data later in the bill. You'll see when that's removed, it removes the need for the definition. It's just used once or twice in the bill. Social media platform. The definition of social media platform on the next page, what it does not mean, subdivision B. So on the Senate side, social media platform does not mean a public or semi-public internet-based service or application that number 2, primarily consists of news, sports, entertainment, interactive video games, electronic commerce, or content that is pre-selected by the provider for which any interactive functionality is incidental to, directly related to, or dependent on the provision of such content. So again, this is a pretty big change, but it's also, again, to strengthen the constitutionality of it. That's very, very content based. You're saying that, if you create a website or an app that is primarily news, sports, entertainment, you're not subject to it. It's pretty on the nose about, we don't want to loop you in. So the House committee decided to remove that as a definition of social media platform. You can still have a website that is, entertainment, and you could be a covered business, but this is about social media platforms. That's something to keep in mind here. Is your social media platform can be news, it can be sports, it can be entertainment. So that exclusion was removed from the definition.
And I think I'm right on this, but let me know. The social media platform definition is only used when we're talking about the default privacy settings,
Yes.
essentially.
Yes, there is.
So when you have a minor, default privacy for minors on a social media platform has to be most private.
Right.
And with a couple of different things
Right.
to make it so that it's not easy for a kid to just undo all of that. And it's easier for the minor to delete the account.
Right.
Okay, so this is just like basic.
There might be one more thing besides, we'll get to it. There might be one thing besides default settings, but yes, it's primarily that you must allow minors to turn off settings,
Yeah.
and that the default settings must be very private.
So that potentially includes more entities, but it's only for these sort of setting issue. But we'll get to that in a second. But it sounds like, that's what I'm trying to say. It sounds like it's broadening it a lot, but it's not as much as it might seem.
Right. So it's important to look at the definition that didn't change. It is still a public or semi-public internet-based service that is primarily intended to connect and allow use of a socially interactive info service. When you say social media platform, I think we all kind of know what those are, right? And I think the House Commerce Committee was concerned that this exclusion was confusing, because a lot of these social media platforms, have games as part of the platform, and you either or you're not a social media platform. And adding the exclusion that if you do this, primarily you're not one, wasn't helpful to the bill, is what they believed. So it doesn't really change a whole lot of it, but it's important for people from the version you all has. Okay. Okay, exclusions. Significant changes here on the next page at the bottom. So the Senate version. Now, this is exclusions from the entire bill. Okay, so you can be a social media platform, you can be a covered business. However, if you meet one of these exclusions, you are not subject to the bill. So you had a subdivision 6, a person who controlled or processed the personal data of not more than 25,000 consumers in the previous calendar year, excluding personal data controlled or processed solely for the purpose of completing the transaction, or 50,000 consumers in the previous calendar year, again, excluding payment transaction data, and had an annual revenue of not more than $1 million in the previous calendar year. So I again advise the committee that you're creating these exclusions that are just solely based on revenue, solely based on processing data. And the more of these exclusions you create, the more the courts are going to be very, because this is going to be a scrutinized bill. So if you want it to be constitutional, you're going to have to be more inclusive of who is in the law. And that's not always politically popular, right? I told them that, like, you are probably going to include more businesses because you're removing the threshold, but it's going to be a stronger law because you're not. So that's kind of the weird thing that we had to go through. So you are removing this exclusion. Are there small businesses that are going to be subject to it? I don't know. I still don't know, right? Probably. But I'm not sure how much this did to stop that.
Right, yeah, our understanding was that there were no Vermont businesses, but we added this to be
Right.
double sure.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Subdivision 7, the term or data, that's fairly significant. You'll see it a lot in data privacy laws. The grand leach blithely, obviously it's usually an exception, but the term or data typically lumps in a bunch more exclusions when it comes to financial institutions' data privacy practices. So removing that is significant. For this bill, maybe not as much as the data privacy bill, but still. You're being more inclusive once again. You are not excluding as much when you remove the phrase or data.
Okay.
Okay, the minimum duty of care, a couple of minor additions here under that, the minimum duty of care means the use of the personal data of a covered minor and the design of an online service prior to future will not result in 3, discrimination against a covered minor based upon several categories, adding religion to those categories. And then subsection C, adding discrimination, saying that the content of the media viewed by a covered minor shall not establish emotional distress, compulsive use, or discrimination, as those terms are used. That was actually a mistake of mine. The discrimination piece should have been added there before, because you're saying that you cannot do these things. Subsection C says the content shall not establish these things that you cannot do, if that makes sense.
Say that again.
So this is saying the minimum duty of care is you cannot create reasonably foreseeable emotional distress, compulsive use, or discrimination, right? These 3 things you cannot do with your app or your website. But the content that you view on these apps or websites cannot establish those 3 things. Okay, this goes back to a minor's right to access speech, right? You cannot discriminate against a minor's access to speech. So if they view a video on one of these apps that causes emotional distress, that's not on the business's liability. They're not liable for that. That's content that the minor's viewing.
Okay.
It's more about the design of the app, the design of the website. Yeah. Okay. Next section, the required default privacy settings. As Rep. Plunkett said earlier, Senator Plunkett, this is the social media platforms default privacy settings. Couple of just grammatical changes. I realized that on the left side, the Senate referred to minor social media account, which I think we all know what that would be, but it's not defined. So it bugged me. So I changed to social media minor's account on a social media platform, which is defined. Not a major change.
Right, and it's more easily made plural than the other one.
But yeah,
Okay.
it's something that should be fixed. The other change in that section is also the next page, just correcting social media account to account on a social media platform.
Hmm.
Transparency, few changes here. This is the cover business shall prominently and clearly provide in their website or mobile application their privacy information, terms of service, policies, standards. And on the Senate side, this was getting into compelled speech territory, what the House believes. You're requiring a business to provide detailed descriptions of their algorithmic recommendation system. That could be a trade secret, right? That could be just compelled speech, which a business could claim they don't have to do. So on the House side, they changed it to the purpose of each system instead of a description of it. And instead of the factors, which again could be trade secret inputs used by the system, which could be your clicking, what inputs do you use to build your algorithm? Is it clicks? Is it how long you view a video? Is it how fast you scroll? Is it liking something? Is it sharing something? Right? Those are the inputs. Next section, 2449F, the prohibited data and design practices. Subdivision 3, this is the not allowing in the Senate side, not allowing a consumer to monitor the online activity of a covered minor. I brought up that a consumer is defined as a Vermont resident, and it makes more sense if you're going to prevent a person from tracking a minor. It should be any individual. It should not just be a Vermont resident. It should be everybody, right? It should not be able to track a minor. So we changed consumer to the word individual, which is any person. Bottom of that page, rulemaking. The AG now has a specific deadline to create rules on it before January 1, 2027. Instead of just shall adopt or shall have the authority. This is now shall adopt. Age assurance, the next section. Adding the intro on the House version during the process of conducting age assurance, just adding some language to ensure the language is specific to this. During this process, covered businesses and processors shall. Number 2, on the Senate version, immediately upon determining whether a user is a covered minor, delete any personal data collected of that user for age assurance, except whether the user is or is not determined to be a covered minor. On the House side, except the determination of the user's age range. And this is that new term that we defined earlier. The covered business is, going to be able to conduct that type of analysis as to whether their users match this 0 to 2 to 17, whatever the age range is that they come up with, and not just specifically a covered minor. They're given more leeway. This is more giving the business more
Flexibility.
yes. Instead of whether or not it's true or not, it's like it's an age range. It's more of a yeah. Number 4. Not combine on the Senate side, not combine personal data of a user collected for age assurance with any other personal data of the user, except whether the user is or is not determined to be a covered minor. On the House side, this is again going back to the age range. Not combine personal data, except the determination of the age range with any other personal data of the user. Adding a new except. Shall not disclose personal data of the user collected for age assurance to a third party that is not a processor. And we changed age definition to age determination in subdivision 6. All good there? Okay, rulemaking, changing July 1st, 2027 to January 1, 2027. You may have forgotten, but the AG is given 2 specific rulemaking authorities. One is to This is for age assurance, so giving businesses methods to identify age assurance methods. The other one went by earlier is the design practices, privacy protections. Those are two specific rulemaking authorities the AG has here. No change to the enforcement language. It's still the Vermont Consumer Protection Act. No change to limitations. The only change remaining is the effective dates. So the Senate version was July 1, 2026. The House version is January 1, 2027. And the reason there was to give the AG time to adopt rules because the rulemaking is really important here on this bill. And the AG testified saying that would be enough time for them to adopt rules. So pushing it out 6 months and giving the AG authority starting July 1st to begin to adopt those rules. So they have a year and a half to do that.
Okay, great. Thank you for getting us through the whole bill. Do we have questions? People have questions?
Still right to private action on the bill.
Through the, yes, through the Consumer Protection Act, yes.
And we got rid of the protections of any business in the state of Vermont, so that's out of there as well. Correct.
So the 25,000 and 50,000, yeah, which can be in any state, including Vermont, yeah.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Sure.
So we'll discuss this more. So I'd like to have you in again and possibly the reporter of the bill. Are there any other witnesses that folks would like to have? And you can tell me after this meeting if you think of something. And actually, let's get the witness list from the House, please, Linda, when you get a chance, so that we see everyone.
Okay.
All right.
I'll be, yeah,
Rick.
yeah.
Thank
that's
you.
good.
Thank you. This was very helpful.
Sure, appreciate it.
Please.
Rick, Rick's want to see you come with far.
With my slushy.
Yeah.
Bye, guys.
See you. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, if we don't have anything else, we are adjourned.
Sure.